Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. And sometimes the universe has a way of putting power back into the hands of those who've been wronged. My ex-fiance thought he knew everything about me, but he had no idea who I really was. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by someone who claimed to love you, because this story will remind you that karma doesn't always come when you expect it, but it always comes exactly when you need it most. My name is Camille Winters. I am 34 years old, and I live in downtown Seattle, in a corner penthouse that overlooks Elliott Bay. From my floor-to-ceiling windows, I can see the ferries cutting through the grey-green water, carrying people to places they've never been before. I've always found something poetic about that, the idea that you can board a vessel and emerge somewhere completely different, transformed by the journey itself. I suppose that's what happened to me. In a way, not on a ferry, but through betrayal, through the kind of devastation that either breaks you completely or forges you into something stronger, more resilient, more dangerous in the most elegant way possible. 3 years ago, I was a different person entirely. I was softer then, more trusting, more willing to believe that love was enough to build a life on. I was engaged to Marcus Holloway, a man I'd met during my graduate studies in business administration. Marcus was charming in that effortless way some men possess, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, and while his salary was modest, his ambitions were grand. He talked constantly about the deals he was going to close, the promotions he was going to earn, the life we were going to build together. I believed him. More than that, I supported him. While Marcus focused on climbing the corporate ladder, I was quietly building something much more substantial. My business consulting firm, Meridian Solutions, had started as a small operation I ran from our shared apartment. What began as helping local businesses optimize their operations had evolved into something far more significant. By the time Marcus proposed, I was managing accounts worth millions of dollars, providing strategic guidance to companies across the Pacific Northwest. But Marcus never seemed to grasp the scope of what I'd built. When clients called during dinner, he'd roll his eyes and mutter about my little side business. When I mentioned a particularly challenging project, he'd pat my hand condescendingly and suggest I shouldn't stress myself over small-time consulting work. He saw my success as a hobby, something quaint and temporary that I'd naturally abandon once we were married and I could focus on supporting his career properly. I found his dismissiveness frustrating, but I attributed it to his own insecurities. Marcus had always been competitive, and I assumed that once he achieved the professional success he craved, he'd be more supportive of my accomplishments. Love, I believed, could weather these small storms of ego and misunderstanding. The first crack in our relationship appeared during what should have been a celebration. I'd just signed my largest contract to date, a comprehensive restructuring project with a major retail chain that would pay Meridian Solutions more in 6 months than Marcus made in 2 years. I'd worked for months to secure this deal, flying to meetings in Portland and Vancouver, crafting detailed proposals, proving my worth against established firms with decades of experience. When I told Marcus about the contract, he was washing dishes in our kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, soap suds clinging to his forearms. I remember the exact moment because I'd been so excited to share the news. I'd imagined him dropping the plate he was holding, sweeping me into his arms, telling me how proud he was of what I'd accomplished. Instead, he dried his hands methodically on a kitchen towel and said, "That's great, Cam. Really great. But you know you can't keep this pace up forever, right? Once we're married, you'll want to slow down, maybe think about starting a family." The words hit me like cold water. Slow down? Marcus, this is the biggest break of my career. This contract could set us up for life. He smiled, that patronizing smile I was beginning to recognize. I know you think it's important, but let's be realistic. How long can you really keep juggling all these clients? It's not sustainable for a woman in her 30s who wants a family. I should have recognized the red flags then. The way he diminished my achievements. The casual sexism wrapped in concern for my well-being. The assumption that my dreams were somehow less valid than his. But I was so invested in our relationship, so committed to the future we'd planned together, that I rationalized his behavior. He was under pressure at work. I told myself he was worried about money, about keeping up with my success. Once he felt more secure, he'd be the supportive partner I knew he could be. The second crack came 6 months later, during a dinner with his colleagues. Marcus had been promoted to senior marketing manager, and his new team was celebrating at an upscale restaurant in Bellevue. I joined them reluctantly, knowing from past experience that Marcus's co-workers treated me like an accessory, rather than a person with my own career. But I wanted to support him, to show that I was proud of his achievement. The conversation inevitably turned to work, and Marcus's new boss, David Chen, asked me what I did for a living. I'd learned to downplay my success in these situations, knowing that Marcus was uncomfortable when I received too much attention. So I simply said I ran a small consulting firm. David's interest was piqued. What kind of consulting? I might know some people who could use your services. Before I could answer, Marcus laughed and waved his hand dismissively. It's really just a hobby. Camille helps some local shops with their bookkeeping. That sort of thing, nothing too serious. The table fell silent. David looked confused, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. That afternoon, I'd finalized a deal with a manufacturing company that would bring in more revenue than Marcus's entire department generated in a quarter. I'd spent 3 years building Meridian Solutions into a respected firm with clients across multiple industries, and Marcus had just reduced it to helping local shops with their bookkeeping. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I stood in front of the mirror and tried to understand what was happening to my relationship. The woman looking back at me was successful, accomplished, financially independent, but the woman sitting at that dinner table felt small, diminished, apologetic for her own achievements. Marcus wasn't just failing to support me, he was actively undermining me. When I returned to the table, I quietly corrected the record. Actually, Meridian Solutions specializes in operational restructuring for mid to large companies. We've helped over 40 businesses optimize their processes and improve their bottom lines. David looked impressed. That's fascinating. What's your background? I told him about my MBA, my experience in management consulting, the specialized certification I'd earned in organizational psychology. As I spoke, I watched Marcus's face grow increasingly tense. His colleagues were asking intelligent questions about my work, treating me with the professional respect I'd been craving. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. But when we got home, Marcus was furious. Did you have to make such a big deal about your work? You completely overshadowed my promotion. I was just being honest about what I do. You were showing off. Do you know how that makes me look? Like I can't provide for my own fiancée, so she has to go out and play businesswoman to make ends meet. The phrase play businesswoman hit me like a physical blow. I'd been building my career for years, working 18-hour days, sacrificing social plans and personal time to establish myself in a competitive industry. And Marcus saw it as playing. This isn't about you providing for me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is about my career, my passion, my identity. I'm not going to apologize for being successful. Identity? Marcus scoffed. Your identity is going to be my wife. Or at least, it should be if you actually want this marriage to work. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Replaying our conversation, I'd spent so much time trying to make myself smaller, more palatable, more supportive of Marcus's ego. But I was starting to realize that no amount of self-diminishment would ever be enough. He didn't want a partner, he wanted an accessory. Someone who would make him look good without ever threatening his sense of superiority. The final crack came during what should have been the happiest time of our relationship. We were planning our wedding, scheduled for the following spring. I'd been handling most of the arrangements myself, juggling venue bookings and vendor meetings alongside my demanding client schedule. Marcus had been working late more frequently, claiming his new promotion came with increased responsibilities. I didn't question it at first. I was proud of his dedication, and I understood the pressure of taking on a new role. But as the weeks passed, I noticed changes in his behavior. He was more secretive with his phone, more evasive about his schedule. When I suggested we spend a weekend looking at honeymoon destinations, he said he was too busy to think about vacation planning. The revelation came in the most cliched way possible. Marcus had left his laptop open on our kitchen table, and when I walked by, I saw an email notification from someone named Jessica. The preview showed enough of the message to make my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about what you said about Camille, and I think you're right. You deserve someone who actually appreciates you." I stared at the screen for a long moment, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Then with trembling hands, I opened the email thread. What I found was months of correspondence between Marcus and Jessica Barnes, a 26-year-old marketing coordinator who'd recently joined his company. The emails started professionally enough, but quickly evolved into something more intimate. Marcus complained about feeling unappreciated in our relationship, about how my success made him feel inadequate. Jessica offered sympathy and validation, telling him he deserved better than a woman who was too focused on her career to properly support her man. The most devastating email was from the previous week. Marcus had written, "I can't keep pretending anymore. Camille is successful, but she's not the woman I thought I was marrying. She's too ambitious, too independent. She doesn't need me the way Jessica does. I think it's time I started being honest about what I want in a partner." Jessica had responded, "I've been waiting for you to realize that. A real woman supports her man instead of trying to compete with him. When you're ready to be with someone who actually values you, I'll be here." I closed the laptop and sat in our kitchen, surrounded by wedding planning materials and engagement gifts, processing the destruction of my relationship. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me. He was constructing an entire narrative about why I wasn't sufficient, why my accomplishments somehow made me less worthy of love. The confrontation happened that evening. Marcus came home from work with flowers, a guilty gesture that now made perfect sense. I was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open in front of me. "We need to talk," I said. He saw the screen, and the color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like he might try to deny it, but then his expression hardened into something cold and defensive. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said, setting the flowers on the counter. "How long has this been going on?" 3 months, but Camille, you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything. You're cheating on me with a woman you work with, and you've been planning to leave me for her." Marcus sat down across from me, and I could see him shifting into the manipulative mode I'd witnessed during his sales presentations. "This isn't about Jessica. This is about us, about what we've become. You're so focused on your business that you've forgotten we're supposed to be building a life together. So, you decided to build a life with someone else instead." I decided to find someone who actually wants to be with me, not someone who sees me as an obstacle to her career. The accusation was so unfair, so completely divorced from reality, that I almost laughed. "Marcus, I've supported you through every promotion, every setback, every late night at the office. I've planned our entire wedding while managing my clients and growing my business. How exactly have I treated you like an obstacle? You make me feel small, Camille. Do you know what it's like to be engaged to someone who earns more than you do? To go to dinner parties where your fiancé is the most successful person in the room? Jessica looks up to me. She admires what I've accomplished. She doesn't make me feel like I'm not enough. I stared at him, finally understanding the true scope of his resentment. This wasn't about infidelity or falling out of love. This was about his inability to handle being with a woman who was more successful than he was. He'd rather be with someone who made him feel superior than someone who challenged him to grow. So what happens now? I asked. I'm going to end it with Jessica and try to work things out with us. The offer was so pathetic, so transparently self-serving, that I felt a surge of clarity. No, Marcus, I'm not your backup plan. If you want to be with Jessica, be with Jessica, but we're done. He looked genuinely surprised, as if he'd expected me to fight for him, to beg him to reconsider. Camille, don't make a decision you'll regret. You're 34 years old. How many more chances do you think you'll have at marriage? At starting a family? The cruelty of the comment took my breath away. He was trying to use my age, my desire for partnership, as weapons against me. He wanted me to believe that I was lucky to have him, that his betrayal was somehow my fault for being too successful. Too independent, too much. Get out, I said quietly. This is my apartment too. The lease is in my name. The security deposit came from my account. The furniture was purchased with my money. Get out. He must have heard something in my voice that warned him not to push further because he stood up and walked to the bedroom. I heard him moving around, packing his belongings, making phone calls. Within 2 hours he was gone, leaving behind only the engagement ring on the kitchen counter, and a note that said he hoped I'd eventually understand his position. I spent that night alone in our apartment, surrounded by wedding planning materials, and the detritus of a relationship I thought would last forever. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat in the silence and felt something shifting inside me, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. The next morning, I called all our wedding vendors and cancelled our reservations. I returned the engagement ring to the jeweler and used the refund to take myself on a solo trip to Paris, something I'd always wanted to do but had postponed for the sake of our shared budget. I spent a week walking through the Louvre, sitting in café gardens, and remembering who I was before I'd started trying to fit myself into Marcus's vision of what a fiancée should be. When I returned to Seattle, I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. Meridian Solutions had been successful before, but now it became my primary focus. I hired 2 additional consultants and expanded our services to include executive coaching and leadership development. Within 6 months, our revenue had doubled. Within a year, we were working with some of the largest companies in the Pacific Northwest. I also moved out of the apartment Marcus and I had shared, and into the penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. The space was entirely mine, modern, sophisticated, filled with art I'd chosen and furniture that reflected my taste alone. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living in my own life instead of adapting to someone else's expectations. I didn't hear from Marcus for over a year. Occasionally, mutual friends would mention seeing him around town with Jessica, but I felt no curiosity about his new relationship. I was too busy building something extraordinary to waste time looking backward. The beginning of my revenge came through pure coincidence, though I've learned to believe that the universe has a sense of timing when it comes to justice. I was at Revenge Treats, a bakery that had become my favorite spot for morning coffee and afternoon meetings. The owner, Helena, made the most incredible pastries, and the atmosphere was perfect for informal client consultations. I'd been going there for months, enjoying the irony of the name given my recent personal history. I was reviewing a proposal for a new client when David Chen walked in. It took me a moment to recognize him, Marcus's former boss from that disastrous dinner party 3 years earlier. He looked harried, stressed, definitely not like a man enjoying his morning coffee. "Routine, Camille?" he said, approaching my table. "I'm not sure if you remember me, David Chen. I worked with Marcus at Innovate Marketing." "Of course I remember you," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Please sit, you look like you've had a rough morning." He sat down gratefully and ordered a double espresso. "Rough month. Actually, I left Innovate about 6 months ago to start my own agency. It's been incredibly challenging." "What kind of agency?" "Digital marketing, focused on helping established companies transition to online platforms. The idea is solid, but execution has been brutal. I'm spending so much time on administrative tasks that I can barely focus on actual client work." I sipped my coffee, remembering how Marcus had dismissed David as a decent guy, but not particularly visionary. "What kind of administrative challenges?" "Everything: workflow optimization, team management, client communication systems. I know what I want the company to look like, but I can't seem to get from point A to point B efficiently." "That's exactly the kind of problem Meridian Solutions specializes in." David looked confused. "Meridian Solutions?" "My consulting firm. We help companies streamline their operations so they can focus on what they do best." He stared at me for a moment, then laughed. "You mean the bookkeeping hobby Marcus mentioned?" "That would be it." "Jesus, Camille. I'm sorry. I had no idea you were running a legitimate consulting firm. Marcus made it sound like you were helping corner stores balance their checkbooks." Marcus had a very specific perspective on my career. David was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Would you be willing to look at what I'm building? I mean, as a potential client?" I pulled out my business card and handed it to him. "I'd be happy to schedule a consultation." 3 days later, David came to my office for what was supposed to be a preliminary meeting. He brought financial records, organizational charts, and a list of problems that would have overwhelmed most new business owners. But as I reviewed his materials, I felt the familiar thrill of seeing a solvable puzzle. Chen Marketing Solutions had solid fundamentals, good client relationships, quality work, reasonable pricing, but their internal systems were chaos. They had no standardized processes for project management, no clear communication protocols, and no scalable structure for growth. David was trying to handle everything himself, which was burning him out and limiting his company's potential. "This is completely fixable," I told him, "but it's going to require a comprehensive overhaul of how you operate." "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" 6 months for full implementation, with measurable improvements starting within the first month. David looked relieved for the first time since I'd seen him at the bakery. "What would something like this cost?" I quoted him a price that was substantial but fair, given the scope of work involved. David didn't flinch. "When can we start?" "I'll have a detailed proposal to you by the end of the week." That weekend, I crafted one of the most comprehensive restructuring plans I'd ever created. I outlined new systems for project management, client communication, team coordination, and financial tracking. I designed workflow protocols that would eliminate the bottlenecks currently strangling his operation. Most importantly, I created a scalable structure that would allow Chen Marketing Solutions to grow without losing efficiency. David signed the contract immediately. Working with David was a revelation. He was everything Marcus had never been: collaborative, respectful, genuinely interested in my expertise. He implemented my recommendations quickly and thoroughly, trusting my judgment even when the changes felt uncomfortable. Within a month, his team was operating more efficiently than they had since the company's founding. As we worked together, I learned more about David's background and his vision for Chen Marketing Solutions. He'd left his corporate job not out of frustration, but because he'd identified a genuine market opportunity. His approach to digital marketing was innovative and effective, combining traditional relationship building with cutting-edge technology. He was exactly the kind of client I most enjoyed working with: smart, ambitious, and willing to invest in doing things correctly. By the third month of our engagement, David's company had landed 3 major new clients and was generating enough revenue to hire additional staff. By the 6th month, they'd moved to a larger office space and were being recognized as one of the fastest-growing agencies in Seattle. "I can't believe the difference you've made," David said during one of our regular check-in meetings. 6 months ago, I was working 16-hour days and barely keeping up. Now I actually have time to focus on strategy and business development. That's what happens when you build systems instead of just working harder, I replied. You've created something scalable. I want to expand the contract, David said. I'd like Meridian Solutions to handle our ongoing operational consulting. This partnership has been too valuable to end. I was flattered but also cautious. David, at some point your company will be large enough that you'll want to bring these functions in-house. I don't want to create dependency. I'm not talking about dependency. I'm talking about competitive advantage. You understand my business better than anyone except me. Why would I want to lose that? We restructured our arrangement so that Meridian Solutions became Chen Marketing Solutions' primary operational consultant, with a retainer agreement that guaranteed ongoing support, while allowing both companies to grow independently. It was one of the most successful partnerships I'd ever developed. Over the following months, I watched David's company continue to expand. He hired talented people, landed high-profile clients, and developed innovative service offerings that set him apart from his competitors. Chen Marketing Solutions became known for delivering exceptional results, while maintaining the kind of internal efficiency that allowed them to take on projects other agencies couldn't handle. As David's business grew, so did our professional relationship. He frequently sought my input on strategic decisions, and I found myself genuinely invested in his success. He was building something impressive, and I was proud to be part of it. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. While I was helping David create a thriving business, Marcus was still working at Innovate Marketing, having never received the promotions he'd once been so confident about. Through mutual acquaintances, I'd heard that his relationship with Jessica had become complicated after she'd discovered he'd been similarly dismissive of her career ambitions. Apparently, Marcus's pattern of undermining his partners wasn't specific to me, but I wasn't thinking about Marcus. I was too busy building something extraordinary. The revelation came during a casual conversation at Revenge Treats. David and I had started meeting there regularly to discuss his company's progress in a more relaxed setting. Helena, the owner, had gotten to know us and always saved our favorite corner table. I hired a new senior marketing manager last week, David mentioned while reviewing some client proposals. The guy came highly recommended and his portfolio is solid. That's great. What's his background? He's been at Innovate Marketing for the past 4 years, worked his way up from junior associate to senior manager. His name is Marcus Holloway. I felt the world tilt slightly, like the moment when you realize you've been walking on ice that's thinner than you thought. Marcus Holloway? Yeah, do you know him? He mentioned he used to work with me at Innovate before I left. I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to process this development. We've met. Small world. He seems like a decent guy, very confident about his abilities. Sure he is. David continued talking about his new hire, but I was barely listening. Marcus was coming to work for David, which meant he was coming to work for a company that depended on Meridian Solutions for its operational success. He was going to be working under systems I'd designed, following processes I'd created, contributing to a success that I'd helped build. And he had no idea The first time I saw Marcus in David's office, he was sitting in a conference room reviewing client files. 3 years had passed since our breakup, and he looked older, more tired. His hairline had receded slightly, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was still handsome, but the easy confidence that had once attracted me seemed forced now, like he was trying too hard to project success. I was there for a routine quarterly review with David, but our meeting was delayed because David was handling a crisis with one of his clients. While I waited in the lobby, I could see Marcus through the conference room's glass walls, completely absorbed in his work. Camille. David appeared beside me, looking slightly frazzled. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. We had a situation with the Morrison account that required immediate attention." "No problem. I brought some reading material. Actually, this might be a good opportunity for you to meet our new senior marketing manager. Marcus has been asking questions about our operational systems, and I thought you could give him some context." Before I could object, David was leading me toward the conference room. Marcus looked up as we entered, and I watched his expression shift from professional interest to shock to something approaching panic. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Camille Winters, our operational consultant." "Camille, this is Marcus Holloway." Marcus stood up slowly, his face pale. "Hello, Camille." "Marcus." I kept my voice professionally neutral. "David tells me you have questions about the operational systems." Yes, I was wondering about the client communication protocols. They're very sophisticated. Thank you. I designed them specifically to minimize miscommunication and maximize efficiency. David beamed proudly. Camille revolutionized our entire operation. Before Meridian Solutions, we were constantly putting out fires. Now everything runs smoothly. Marcus's eyes widened as he processed this information. "Meridian Solutions is your company?" "It is. I had no idea you were still. I didn't realize you were working in this space." "I've been working in this space for 6 years. David's company is one of my most successful partnerships." David, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, continued praising my work. "Camille's systems are the reason we've been able to grow so quickly. Her operational framework is the foundation of everything we do." Marcus sat down heavily, clearly trying to process what he was hearing. The woman he'd dismissed as running a bookkeeping hobby was not only still in business, but was integral to the success of his new company. "Marcus, why don't you walk Camille through the questions you had about the communication protocols?" David suggested. "She can explain the reasoning behind each step." For the next hour, I found myself in the surreal situation of explaining my own systems to my ex-fiancé. Marcus asked thoughtful questions, and I answered them professionally. But I could see his mind working as he realized the scope of what I'd built. Every process he'd been learning, every system he'd been implementing, every protocol he'd been following, all of it had been designed by me. "The project management system is particularly elegant," Marcus said finally. "It eliminates most of the bottlenecks that plague agencies this size." That was the goal. David's team was talented, but they were being held back by inefficient processes. "How long did it take you to design all of this?" 6 months for the initial implementation, but we've been refining it continuously over the past 1.5 years. Marcus was quiet for a moment, absorbing the timeline. "So you started working with David right after our relationship ended?" "Yes." David looked confused. "Wait, you two know each other personally?" "We were engaged," I said simply. "It didn't work out." The silence in the room was deafening. David's mouth opened slightly as he processed this information, and Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "I should let you get back to your meeting," I said, standing up. "Marcus, if you have any other questions about the systems, you can reach out to my office." "Camille, wait." Marcus said, standing up as well. Could we talk privately for a moment? I looked at David, who nodded and excused himself from the conference room. Marcus waited until David was out of earshot before turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I had no idea, he said quietly, about your business, about your success, about any of this. Why would you? You made it very clear that my career wasn't worth your attention. I was wrong. I can see that now. What you've built is incredible. Yes, it is. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I remembered from our relationship. I owe you an apology for everything, for how I treated you, for how I talked about your work, for how I ended things. You don't owe me anything, Marcus. We both moved on. Have you? Moved on, I mean? I considered the question. I've built a life I'm proud of. I'm successful, independent, and surrounded by people who respect what I do. So yes, I've moved on. I haven't, he said quietly. I think about you all the time. About what we had. About what I threw away. What about Jessica? Marcus's face darkened. That ended almost a year ago. It turns out she had some of the same issues with my career that I had with yours. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Sorry, I mean? I thought about it honestly. I'm sorry that you're unhappy, but I'm not sorry that we're not together anymore. Could we try again? I know I have a lot to make up for, but I'm different now. I understand what I lost. The request was so unexpected that I almost laughed. After 3 years of building a life without him, after creating success that surpassed anything we'd imagined. Together, he wanted to try again. He wanted to step back into my world now that he understood its value. No, Marcus, we can't. Why not? I know I hurt you, but people change. I've changed. Have you? Or do you just finally understand what you gave up? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Maybe both. The problem isn't that you didn't understand my success back then. The problem is that you didn't respect me enough to try to understand it. You dismissed something that was important to me because it threatened your ego. That's not something that changes overnight. I know I made mistakes. You made choices. You chose to believe that your career was more important than mine. You chose to undermine me instead of supporting me. You chose to leave me for someone who made you feel superior. Those weren't mistakes, Marcus. They were decisions that revealed who you really are. He looked stricken. So that's it. There's no possibility of forgiveness. I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to repeat the same patterns. What if I could prove that I'm different now? You can't. Because the fundamental issue wasn't about your career or your insecurities. It was about respect. You didn't respect me then, and you don't respect me now. How can you say that? I just told you how incredible I think you are. You think I'm incredible now, because I've achieved a level of success that you can't dismiss. But what happens when I'm having a bad quarter? What happens when I make a mistake or face a setback? Will you still think I'm incredible then? Or will you go back to seeing me as someone who needs to be managed and minimized? Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. I know who you are, Marcus. You're someone who can only love a woman if she makes you look good. You're someone who needs to feel superior to feel secure. That's not love, that's possession. And I refuse to be possessed by anyone. David knocked on the conference room door, interrupting our conversation. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a client call in 5 minutes. Of course, I said, grateful for the interruption. Marcus, I hope you're happy working here. David's built something special, and I'm sure you'll contribute to its success. Over the following weeks, I watched Marcus adjust to his new role with a mixture of professional interest and personal detachment. He was competent at his job, just as he'd always been. but I could see him struggling with the cognitive dissonance of working within systems I'd created. Every time he used one of my processes, every time he followed one of my protocols, he was forced to confront the reality of what he dismissed. And Lost David, meanwhile, was thriving. His company continued to grow, and he'd begun expanding into new service areas. He frequently consulted with me on strategic decisions, and I found myself genuinely invested in his success. He was building something impressive, and I was proud to be part of it. The dynamic between the three of us was complex but manageable. Marcus was professional during our occasional interactions, but I could see the weight of regret in his eyes. David remained enthusiastic about our partnership, unaware of the full history between Marcus and me, and I focused on what I'd always focused on, doing excellent work for a client who valued my expertise. The situation came to a head during a company retreat that David organized for his team. He'd rented a conference center in the San Juan Islands, and the plan was to spend 2 days on strategic planning and team building. As the operational consultant, I was invited to facilitate some of the sessions. Marcus tried to avoid me during the retreat, but the intimate setting made that impossible. During a break between sessions, he approached me while I was standing on the deck overlooking the water. "This is torture," he said quietly. "What is?" "Working with you, seeing you succeed, realizing what I threw away." I continued looking out at the water, watching a ferry make its way toward the mainland. "That's your choice, Marcus. You can work somewhere else if this is too difficult." "I don't want to work somewhere else. I like it here. David's a good boss, and the work is interesting. Then learn to live with the consequences of your choices." "Do you hate me?" The question surprised me. I turned to look at him, really look at him. For the first time since he'd started working for David, he looked tired, older, but also somehow smaller than I remembered. The arrogance that had once defined him had been replaced by something more vulnerable, more uncertain. "No," I said honestly. "I don't hate you. I don't feel anything for you anymore." "Marcus, that's the difference. I don't know if that's better or worse. It's healthier." That evening, during the retreat dinner, David stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he said, raising his glass. 2 years ago, Chun Marketing Solutions was just an idea. Today, we're one of the fastest growing agencies in Seattle. That success belongs to all of you. But I want to particularly acknowledge someone who's been instrumental in our growth. He turned toward me, and I felt a familiar warmth of professional recognition. Camille Winters and Meridian Solutions haven't just been our operational consultants. They've been our strategic partners. The systems Camille designed are the foundation of everything we do. The processes she created allow us to deliver exceptional work while maintaining the efficiency that sets us apart from our competitors. Camille, you've been essential to our success, and I'm grateful for everything you've done." The room erupted in applause, and I felt genuinely moved by David's recognition. But as I glanced around the table, I caught Marcus's expression. He was clapping along with everyone else, but his face was a mask of complicated emotions: pride, regret, and something that looked like awe. After dinner, I found myself alone with David on the conference center's deck. The rest of the team had gone inside for drinks and conversation, but David seemed to want a moment of quiet reflection. "I mean what I said in there," he told me. "I couldn't have built this without you. You had all the talent and vision. I just helped you organize it more effectively. It's more than that. You saw possibilities I couldn't see. You understood my business better than I did in some ways. That's what good consultants do." David was quiet for a moment, looking out at the water. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Marcus seems very affected by working with you. I know you said you were engaged, but was it serious?" "I considered how much to share. We were planning to get married. It ended badly. I'm sorry. That must make this situation complicated. It was complicated at first, but I've realized that working with you has actually provided a kind of closure I didn't know I needed. How so? For years, I wondered if Marcus was right about me. If I was too ambitious, too focused on my career, too unwilling to compromise. Seeing him work within systems I created, watching him succeed because of processes I designed. It's helped me understand that the problem was never with me. The problem was with his inability to handle being with a successful woman. David nodded thoughtfully. He's mentioned you a few times, always with a lot of regret. Regret is useful only if it leads to growth. I'm not sure Marcus has learned anything beyond the fact that he made a mistake. What do you mean? He's sorry he lost me, but I don't think he understands why he lost me. He sees my success now and regrets not appreciating it then, but he hasn't grappled with the underlying attitudes that made him dismiss it in the first place. You think he'd make the same mistakes again? I think he'd make different mistakes with the same root cause. He still needs to be the most important person in his partner's life. He still needs to feel superior to feel secure. Those aren't things that change just because you realize you made a mistake. David was quiet for a long moment. You're probably right. I've noticed he has a hard time taking direction from our female team members. He's never disrespectful, but there's a subtle resistance there. That doesn't surprise me. For what it's worth, I think he lost something extraordinary when he lost you. He lost something real. Whether it was extraordinary depends on your perspective. The next day, during our final strategic planning session, I presented a comprehensive analysis of Chen Marketing Solutions' growth trajectory. David's company had achieved remarkable success, but I could see areas for continued improvement and expansion. As I outlined my recommendations, I felt the familiar satisfaction of solving complex problems and helping a client reach their potential. After the presentation, Marcus approached me as I was packing up my materials. That was incredible, he said. The way you analyzed our market position, the growth strategies you outlined. I've never seen anything like it. Thank you. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday. About consequences and choices. What about it? You're right. I made choices. And now I have to live with them. But I need you to know that I understand what I lost. Not just your success, but you, the person you are, your intelligence, your integrity, your strength. I was too insecure to appreciate it then. But I see it now. I looked at him for a long moment. I'm glad you see it, but Marcus, understanding what you lost doesn't change the fact that you lost it. I know. I just needed you to know that I understand. I appreciate that, but I need you to understand something too. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I've grown, changed, become someone I'm proud to be. That growth happened because I wasn't trying to make myself smaller for someone else's comfort. I can't go backward, and I won't. I wouldn't want you to. Good. Then we can work together professionally without this constant undercurrent of regret and missed opportunities. Marcus nodded, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. Can I ask you one more thing? What? Are you happy? I considered the question seriously. I'm fulfilled. I'm successful. I'm surrounded by people who respect and value me. I'm building something meaningful with my career. So yes, I'm happy. I'm glad. You deserve that. So do you, Marcus, but you'll never find it if you keep looking backward. Over the following months, our working relationship settled into a comfortable rhythm. Marcus threw himself into his job with renewed energy, and I continued to provide operational support to David's growing company. The awkwardness gradually faded, replaced by professional respect and mutual understanding. Marcus never brought up our past relationship again, and I found myself genuinely hoping he would find happiness with someone better suited to his needs. He was a good marketing manager, And David's company benefited from his skills and experience. That the real transformation was in how I saw myself and my work. Working with David, seeing Marcus struggle with the reality of my success. Watching my systems enable a company to thrive, all of it had crystallized something important for me. I wasn't just good at what I did. I was exceptional. I wasn't just successful. I was building something that mattered. The final piece of my revenge, if you could call it that, came during Chen Marketing Solutions' 3rd anniversary celebration. David had organized a party at a rooftop venue in downtown Seattle, and the guest list included clients, partners, and industry colleagues. It was a celebration of everything the company had accomplished, and a recognition of the people who had made that success possible. I arrived at the party wearing a black dress that had cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, my hair styled in a way that made me feel confident and powerful. The view from the rooftop was spectacular, the city lights twinkling below, Elliott Bay stretching out toward the islands, the mountains visible in the distance. David introduced me to several potential clients, and I found myself energized by the conversations. These were sophisticated business people who understood the value of operational excellence, who appreciated the complexity of what I did. I exchanged business cards, scheduled follow-up meetings, and felt the familiar thrill of growing my business. At one point during the evening, I found myself in conversation with Sarah Mitchell, the CEO of a major retail chain that was considering hiring Meridian Solutions for a comprehensive restructuring project. Sarah was impressive, smart, decisive, and clearly successful in her own right. David speaks very highly of your work, Sarah said. He credits you with much of his company's success. David built something special. I just helped him organize it more effectively. That's modest of you. From what I understand, your systems are the reason his company has been able to scale so quickly without losing quality. Operational efficiency is the foundation of sustainable growth. Exactly. That's why I'm interested in exploring a partnership. My company is at a critical juncture, and I think we could benefit from your expertise. As we talked, I noticed Marcus watching from across the room. He was standing with a group of his colleagues, but his attention was focused on my conversation with Sarah. I could see him processing what he was witnessing, me networking with high-level executives, discussing multi-million-dollar projects, commanding respect and admiration. Later in the evening, David called for everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he said. 3 years ago, I had an idea for a different kind of marketing agency. Today, Chen Marketing Solutions is recognized as one of the most innovative and efficient agencies in the Pacific Northwest. He paused, looking around the room. That success belongs to everyone on our team, but I want to particularly acknowledge someone who's been instrumental in our growth, Camille Winters. Would you join me up here? I made my way to the front of the room, feeling the eyes of everyone present. David handed me a microphone, and I looked out at the gathered crowd, clients, colleagues, competitors, and Marcus. 3 years ago, I met David at a coffee shop. He was a talented entrepreneur with a great idea who was struggling with the operational challenges of building a business. What I saw was someone with the vision to create something exceptional and the wisdom to invest in the systems that would make that vision sustainable. I paused, making eye contact with various people in the audience. The partnership between Meridian Solutions and Chen Marketing Solutions has been one of the most rewarding of my career, not just because of the financial success, but because of what we've built together. David has created a company that delivers outstanding results while maintaining the kind of internal culture that makes people want to do their best work. I found Marcus in the crowd, and for just a moment our eyes met. Success in business, like success in life, isn't about individual achievement. It's about building something larger than yourself, something that creates value for others. It's about having the confidence to invest in excellence, even when the path isn't clear. The applause was warm and genuine as I returned to my place in the crowd. Several people approached me to offer congratulations and discuss potential partnerships. I felt the familiar satisfaction of being recognized for my work, but also something deeper, a sense of completion. The evening wound down gradually, and I found myself on the rooftop's edge, looking out at the city lights. Marcus appeared beside me, holding 2 glasses of wine. For old time's sake, he offered. I accepted the glass, and we stood in comfortable silence for a moment. You were impressive tonight, he said finally. Thank you. I keep thinking about what you said at the retreat. About consequences and choices. What about it? I think I'm finally understanding what you meant. It's not just about the specific choice I made to leave you. It's about the person I was who made that choice. The person who couldn't handle being with someone more successful than he was. That's very insightful. I've been thinking about getting therapy to work on some of these issues. I turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. That's a good idea. I know it's too late for us. I know you've moved on, and I respect that, but I don't want to make the same mistakes with someone else. I'm glad to hear that. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I'm capable of change? Real change, not just recognizing my mistakes. I considered the question carefully. I think anyone is capable of change if they're willing to do the work. But Marcus, you have to want to change. For yourself. Not because you're hoping to win back something you lost. I know. I'm not asking because I think it will change anything between us. I'm asking because I want to be better. For me. Then yes, I think you're capable of change. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. Thank you. Thank you for the work you've done with David, for how you've handled this impossible situation, for giving me the chance to see who I really was. You're welcome. I should let you get back to your evening. I saw you talking with Sarah Mitchell earlier. That looked like important business. It was. She might become a new client. I hope she does. You deserve all the success you've achieved. Azzy. Marcus walked away. I remained on the rooftop, looking out at the city that had become my home. 3 years ago, I'd been a different person, softer, more accommodating, more willing to diminish myself for the sake of someone else's comfort. The woman standing on that rooftop was someone I was proud to be successful, independent, respected, and uncompromising in her standards. Marcus hadn't just lost a fiancée when he chose Jessica over me. He'd lost a partner who would have supported his dreams while building her own. He'd lost someone who would have challenged him to grow, who would have celebrated his successes and weathered his failures. He'd lost the possibility of a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine partnership, but his loss had been my gain, not in a vindictive sense, but in the way that sometimes the worst things that happen to us redirect us toward the best things. Marcus's betrayal had forced me to confront my own worth, to stop making myself smaller for someone else's comfort, to build a life that was entirely my own. The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't in his discomfort or regret. It was in my success, my growth, my refusal to let his limitations define my possibilities. It was in the fact that I'd taken the pain of his betrayal and transformed it into something powerful and meaningful. The following week, I signed the contract with Sarah Mitchell's company. It was the largest deal in Meridian Solutions history, and it would require expanding my team and developing new service offerings as I reviewed the signed documents in my office. I felt the familiar thrill of new challenges and opportunities. David called that afternoon to congratulate me on the new contract. Sarah was incredibly impressed with you, he said. She told me she's never met a consultant who understood her business so quickly. I'm excited about the project. It's going to be an interesting challenge. I'm sure you'll handle it brilliantly. You always do. Thank you for the introduction and for everything else. Thank you for making my company what it is today. As I hung up the phone, I looked out at Elliot. Watching the ferries carry people to new destinations. I thought about journeys and transformations. About the ways we can emerge from difficult passages as different people than we were before. Marcus had been wrong about many things, but he'd been right about one. I was different now. I was stronger, more confident, more uncompromising in my standards. I'd learned that love without respect is just possession, that success without integrity is just ego, and that the most important relationship you can have is with yourself. 6 months later, I received an invitation to Marcus and Jessica's wedding. They'd apparently reconciled after working through their issues. And Marcus had included a note saying he hoped I could be happy for them. I sent a beautiful gift and a polite note of congratulations, but I didn't attend the wedding. Instead, I spent that Saturday morning at Revenge Treats, reviewing proposals for 3 new clients and planning the next phase of Meridian Solutions growth. Elena brought me my usual coffee and a pastry I'd never tried before. New flavor? I asked. Sweet revenge, she said with a smile. I thought you might appreciate the irony. I laughed, taking a bite of the pastry. It was perfect, complex, satisfying, with just the right balance of sweet and bitter. It's delicious, I told her. Just like the real thing. As I sat in that cafe, surrounded by the materials of my success and the possibilities of my future, I realized that revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about refusing to let their limitations limit you. It's about taking the pain they caused and transforming it into something beautiful and powerful. Marcus had thought he knew me, had thought he understood what I was capable of, but he'd never seen the woman I could become when I stopped trying to fit myself into his vision of who I should be. He'd never imagined that his betrayal would be the catalyst for my greatest successes. The woman he'd left was someone who made herself smaller for love. The woman I'd become was someone who made herself larger for herself. And that, more than any vindictive gesture or cruel comeback, was the sweetest revenge of all. 3 years later, Meridian Solutions had become one of the premier consulting firms in the Pacific Northwest. I'd helped dozens of companies optimize their operations, and my success had allowed me to be selective about the clients I worked with. I only partnered with businesses that shared my values and respected my expertise. David's company continued to thrive, and our professional relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship. Marcus had found his place within the organization, and while we rarely interacted directly, I'd heard he was doing good work and had grown more collaborative with his colleagues. I built a life that was entirely my own, successful, meaningful, and filled with people who valued me for who I was, rather than who they wanted me to be. I'd learned that the best revenge isn't about hurting someone who hurt you. It's about becoming so successful and fulfilled that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. The ferry was pulling into the dock as I finished my coffee, and I watched the passengers disembark, carrying their luggage and their stories toward whatever came next. I understood now that betrayal, like travel, can take you places you never expected to go. Sometimes those places are dark and painful, but sometimes they're exactly where you needed to be all along. Marcus had thought he was trading up when he chose Jessica over me, but he'd actually been trading away the possibility of growing into someone worthy of genuine partnership. He'd chosen comfort over challenge, superiority over equality, possession over love. I'd chosen differently. I'd chosen to become someone worthy of the life I wanted to live. And in doing so, I discovered that the best revenge is living well, not in spite of someone else's betrayal, but because of your own courage to demand better. The morning sun was streaming through my office windows as I opened my laptop and began working on a proposal for a new client. Outside, the city was coming alive with the energy of people pursuing their dreams, building their futures, creating something meaningful from the raw materials of their ambition and talent. I was one of them now, in a way I'd never been before. Not someone trying to fit herself into someone else's vision of success, but someone creating her own definition of what a life well lived could look like. Marcus had given me an unexpected gift when he chose to leave me for Jessica. He'd freed me from the exhausting work of making myself smaller, from the constant effort of managing his insecurities, from the suffocating limitations of his vision for our shared future. In losing him, I'd found myself, and that was the most perfect revenge of all.